in circles of knowledge, whenever we're sitting, like, like I mentioned, which is different. It's different from you going to college or in high school, you sitting in the classroom. Although there are certain things that are similar, right? We got the tables, we got the chairs, we got the Epson projector, etc., the MacBook. But there are certain values and adab and etiquettes that we want to maintain, right? In order to try to maximize benefit, right? Which you will often find those same values and etiquettes that are in the circle of knowledge are transferable, i.e. they benefit you and help you even when you're studying in school. So for example, one of those things I want to mention right now is when seeking sacred knowledge is not sitting far or distant from the teacher, right? So I noticed there's several chairs up here that's empty. And we got brothers that went all the way to the back, right? Alhamdulillah, Rosa Parks and already went through it. We good, alhamdulillah. You know what I'm saying? So if you could, anybody, right? Don't sit off in the back, alhamdulillah. Come, inshallah. And where am I getting this from? If I'm saying it's a value of the deen or this is from Islam or whatever, if you look at the famous hadith of Jibril, where the Archangel Gabriel, right? Now at the time, the companions, when they're sitting with the Prophet, they don't know. But a man comes to the Prophet, he has exceedingly black hair, jet black hair, and he's got exceedingly white clothes on, right? Which would be all the indications that he's somewhere local, right? Because he just freshened up and then came and sat right with the Prophet along with the other companions. But the narrator of the hadith, Muhammd ibn Khattab, he said, but nobody knew who he was, nobody recognized him, right? And when it comes to the Muslims at that time, everybody knew everybody. So if they don't know who he is, that must mean what? That must mean what? If everybody in the town knows each other and nobody knows who he is, that must mean what? He's not from around here. But that's contradictory though, because if he's traveling, he should have been dusty, dirty, disheveled, you know what I'm saying? There's no planes, you know what I'm saying, with air compression, or, in a car where you can close up the window, air conditioned. This is camels, donkeys, horses. You're going to be dusty and dirty, especially if you're from somewhere else. So that's already weird. Everybody's paying attention to him. Anyway, that's besides the point though. But when he came, right, he came right up to the Prophet ﷺ. And it says in the hadith, is narrated by Umar ibn Khattab, and there's another narration by Abu Hurairah. Said, وَوَضَعَ كَفَيْهِ عَلَى فَخِذَيْهِ. Right? Said he came right up to the Prophet and put the palm of his hand right on his thighs. Right? So if you can imagine somebody sitting either on like crisscross applesauce, right? Or like on their knees, right? Like when you're sitting in jalus, right? When you pray salat. So when you get up, when you make ruku, or sujood, and you get up and you're still sitting, imagine sitting like that, right? And he puts his hands right on the Prophet. And so, some of the scholars, when they explain that hadith, right, and they talk about the benefits from it, one of the things is that he asked several questions. The angel Jibril, he asked Prophet Muhammad several questions. Questions that he seemingly knew the answer to, because the Prophet would answer him, and then Jibril would say in response, so you're right, that's the right answer. So one of the things they would say is that part of the etiquette and the adab of a student and a teacher, right, because he's coming asking questions, the Prophet responded. So in this scenario, who's the student? No, in this scenario that I'm describing, this hadith, who's the student? Jibril. And who's the teacher? Prophet Muhammad, right? And he came right up to him and sat close to him. So they say what? When a student comes with their teacher, especially if there's space and it's accommodating, you shouldn't sit far away from your teacher. You should come and sit close, right? Play. And then there's all kinds of practical things that's going to benefit, right? That's going to prevent somebody who is trying to, right, in the middle of the class, everything had already started, be in the middle, in the flow of things, and then he's going to come and be like, excuse me, because there's a seat right here. No, you don't have to go to the back, less distracting, less, you know what I'm saying, bothering people and everything. I know the point is what? When it comes to being a student of knowledge, and it's, sacred knowledge, right? That's just one of the many etiquettes and adab, sitting close. Another would be, right, just asking good questions. When he asked the Prophet ﷺ, he asked numerous questions, right? He asked, right, what is Islam? What is Iman? When is the hour? Excuse me. What are the signs of the hour? Okay. All of these questions are fundamental, core questions that everybody needs. We all need to know the answer to those questions. Which, pop quiz, what's the answer to the first question? What is Islam? What was the answer the Prophet said? Remember, I just said everybody's supposed to know. What? In brief, the 5 pillars of Islam. The Prophet said, Arkan al-Islam, right? And tashhadu an la ilaha illallah, and Muhammad Rasulullah, and qam salat, wa ita'i zakat, to the end. The 5 pillars of Islam. Right. So, keeping on with that pop quiz. The second question was what? Akhbirni anil iman. Inform me or tell me what is iman. And the Prophet said, al-imanu, what's the answer? In brief, the 6 pillars of faith. The pillars of, which by the way, who should know this, y'all? All of us should know the 6 pillars of Iman. All of us should. For any of us, that's like ma'aluma bid-darura. Do you have to be, a black belt expert, right? Graduate of, an Islamic university institution? No. But you should know in general, what does it mean to believe in Allah? What does it mean to believe in the angels, the books, the messengers, the day of judgment, destiny, the good and the bitter. The good, the bad, the sweet, and the bitter. You should know, in general, what does that mean? Now, so I want him to know. So another thing, though, is asking good questions, right? Because learning in Islam is not supposed to be passive. Learning should not be passive. Matter of fact, when we started this class, and even a few weeks back, so Celine, some good, some sisters, they bought notebooks and pens for everybody in the class at that time, if you happen to be there at that time, right? And we had discussed in one of one of the brothers, when asked for input, said, man, when we're studying and learning about Islam, we should be taking notes. We shouldn't just be sitting there with our hands in our pockets and, just reclining and sitting back, but everybody should be, because you're hearing statements of the Prophet ﷺ, you're hearing ahadith, you're getting tidbits of information, etc., right? Unless you're blessed with the mind of Imam Shafi. Now, if you have a photographic memory or you're a savant, you know what I'm saying, like Rain Man, and you can just memorize whatever you see, then, mashallah. And Allah bless you and increase you. Allah, man. But for the rest of us, Masakin, right, you should have with you, you know what I'm saying? Even if you use a device, your phone, whatever, although I would, anyways, whatever you got. Do as best as you can, right? But that's just a quick reminder, inshallah. But anyways, we are continuing journeying through and creating with broad strokes, a timeline of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And the vehicle that we're using to do so, right, is the poem by Ibn Abi al-Izz al-Hanafi, rahimahullah, who died in the year 792, right? From, where was he from? Damascus, Syria, right? And he took his teachers by Sirah of the Prophet ﷺ that he had written, right? And his teacher was who? The famous Ibn Kathir, right? Everybody, right? Or most of you have probably heard of Tafsir Ibn Kathir. That scholar, that was one of his teachers. And he had a large volume, right, or writing of the biography of the Prophet ﷺ, known as Usul fi Sirat al-Rasul, or chapters in the life of the Messenger ﷺ. And he took that and like a, expensive juicer, he squeezed and condensed and pulled out, right, the most important events that occurred in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, And he did so in a 100-line poem, right? And that's what we've been covering this whole time. Ustad Imran. What's the name of the poem again? Do you remember it? All right, I'm gonna help you out. I'm gonna say part of it, you say part of it, all right? Al-Urjuzatul Mi'iyya fi... No. Anybody? Help him out. Give him something. Huh? في ذكر حال أشرف البرية. Al-Urjuza, which is, it's just a type of scale in rajz, in Arabic poetry. They have different scales. Rajz is one of them, so it's called Al-Urjuza, because it's on that scale. No problem. Al-Mi'iyya, right? An ascription to the number 100. Because how do you say 100 in Arabic, y'all? Mi'a. So, Al-Urjuzatul Mi'iyya, the 100-line poem, right? Fi dhikri, the literal translation, in the remembrance of, or the mentioning of, right? When you think about dhikr, where do we hear that word from? Ya Jama'ah, where do we hear the word dhikr? So, y'all ain't never heard the word dhikr before? Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innal qulub. So what's dhikr, y'all? Remember, astaghfirullah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. It's not a trick question. Y'all know dhikr is, right? Usually you talk about dhikr of Allah, i.e. remembering Allah. And when you remember Him, mentioning Him, right? So, the dhikr, in the remembrance or mentioning of, hal, right? Hal means the condition or the state, right? But in practical terms, the life and times. Hal ashraf al-bariyah. So, I don't want to simply say Somali culture, but in many cultures, when people are known to be from the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ, what do we call those people? No, we don't call them Sayyid. We call them what? Ashraf, right? Ashraf, meaning noble or nobility, right? So if we had the life and times, Ashraf al-Bariyah. Ashraf, from Ashraf, and we said that means what? Noble, dignified, right? Because they are, right, related to the Prophet ﷺ, but in this case, this is Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So he's not, Sharif, but he's Ashraf, the most noble, al-Bariyah, which is a term for mankind, or human beings. So, the 100-line poem in the life and times of the most noble or the best of mankind. Also, it's written on the cover of the book that we've been using, right? But these are small little things that you should remember. If you come in every Friday, you should at least know the name of the book that you come in to study, right? Again, that's why we say we don't want you to be bad. Those of you who just started, alhamdulillah, ahlan wa sahlan, right? I'm not talking about you, but the rest of y'all, right? If you've been here for a while, you should know the book that you're studying. That's why every time I mention the author, his name, and at least when he died, right? And actually every time we start, we mention the name of the book. I don't translate it every time, but you should be familiar with that. So if somebody asks you where you going, oh, I'm about to go to this class on Friday, inshallah. You're like, oh, for real? What y'all studying? Oh, the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. There's thousands of books on the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. There's super advanced, there's medium, intermediate, or whatever, and there's beginner. Right? So there's all kinds of books. So if somebody said, oh, which book y'all using? What you gonna say? You just be like, man, I don't know, man, but it's just like, it's a good poem, man. You should come to the class, brother. Just come to the class. You should be able to say, right, what it is, especially if you're spending time. Playing? All right. So anyways, up until this point, the last thing we discussed and talked about, and where we stopped from last week is, or excuse me, not last week, the week before, because I traveled last week, is the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ and him being commanded, right, at least as is mentioned in the poem, by arba'a a'wam. After 4 years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the Prophet ﷺ to begin making da'wah publicly. So if the poem says that he started making da'wah publicly, what does that also imply? You said, okay, now da'wah has to be made publicly. What could you infer from that? Yes, moving forward. But before that, what does it mean? Before it became, okay, if it just became public, that means there's a period, because the Sheikh, he doesn't mention that in the poem. He doesn't say that. He just said, now after 4 years, da'wah's got to be made publicly. But it can be, it's understood from that there was a period of time, give or take, 3, almost 4 years, where da'wah was private, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the Prophet ﷺ, وَانذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, and warn your close relatives, your family, your loved ones, and the people in your inner circle, right? Warn them, make da'wah to them, call to them, which is exactly what the Prophet ﷺ did, right? But then, after that, where we started in the poem, or where we stopped in the poem, now it transitioned and moved from that to being public da'wah. Now the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him, فَاسْتَعْ بِمَا تُؤْمَرْ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, right? Now, don't even worry about the mushrikeen saying. You go ahead and you start proclaiming and calling people to Islam publicly, right? So, altogether though, we stopped on, there were stages in the da'wah. Once the Prophet ﷺ is commanded that you are a messenger, a prophet, right? Once he's been commanded, now you are a messenger. Then there's a stage where, okay, now you start telling the people, but just those who are close to you, those who are likely to believe you, those who are your close friends, that know, you know them, they know you, they trust you, that you trust them, right? That you could, with minimal problems and issues, if you talk to them, right? There's a likelihood they'll be receptive to you, and then it transitions from there to, all right, now you go ahead and you start making da'wah to everybody, right? Because like somebody said, the da'wah is for everybody, right? And we're going to learn today, one of the things we're going to talk about, when we say everybody, it means everybody. Not even just human beings, but even the jinn. That's what's going to be one of the things that we're going to be touching on today. So, anyways, that was where we stopped, are the different stages of the da'wah, and I guess for the benefit of a reminder, since we didn't have it last week, these were the different stages that we touched on of the da'wah, right? So, there was that period for about 3 years where it was just a family, right? And that's where you get the likes of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, her relative Wafa ibn Nawfal, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, right? And Uthman ibn Affan, and others, right? Zayd ibn Haritha, Ali ibn Abi Talib, right? The people that are close to the Prophet ﷺ. Then it's public da'wah. And that goes on for give or take about 10 years. The first part of it is difficult. First 3 or 4 years, it's difficult. It's problematic, because before, even when it was private, people knew, the Quraysh knew it was going on, but he's not going on like a soapbox and telling everybody. Because it was private, and between him and the people that he knew, right, although it was private, they knew it was going on, they didn't cause initially the Prophet ﷺ too many problems. The point where it becomes a problem, and now the Quraysh are like, no, we got to do something about this. This is causing us a problem. It's hurting our pockets. People are starting to listen. He's telling people don't pray to a multitude of gods, and they're getting bank and getting money for each and every one of those different gods that people are worshiping. Because when people worship those gods, matter of fact, if y'all have ever been to like an establishment, I remember a mechanic I had that was Buddhist, right? Vietnamese dude, right? And at the front of his shop, he used to have a small altar. He had a small altar. And at that little altar, there's a little statue. There'd be some incense. There would sometimes be bowls of milk. There'd be little peaches. There'd be little offerings. This stuff that he would leave, right? That's what he do. Any of y'all ever seen that? When y'all go to different places, if you get you like some boba tea or something like that, they might have something like that in the front, on the side. But anyways, so when they're worshiping the idol, people leave offerings. From those offerings is money. Who's getting the money? Is the little statue taking the money and putting it in his pocket? No, of course not. Whoever takes care of those idols, they're the ones who's pocketing and taking that money. So if he's saying, nah, we don't want 360 guys. We just want one. They're looking at him like, you messing with our pockets. What you doing? All these offerings. And then not only that, These are multitudes of different reasons why people are coming because of all these different guys. Al-Muhammd, we've already discussed that at length, but it becomes a problem when it's public dialogue. Initially, it's just very difficult, but it's bearable. The later 6 or 7 years are noted by extreme hardship. That's when they start physically accosting, attacking people. That's when people start getting tortured. That's when the Muslims, right, especially those who don't have big tribes or are wealthy or not well connected, etc., that's when they start up into even killing people. That's when it's extremely difficult. Then the public da'wah, right, also has another stage or shift where there's selective combat. And so that's the first years of the hijrah. So it's still public da'wah, making da'wah for everybody, right? But during this time when they're making public da'wah, they're not defending themselves. The Muslims, they're not even allowed to. They're not allowed to fight. They're not allowed to, they killed one of ours, we're gonna kill one of theirs, or they attacked us, we're gonna go and raid them and attack them. They have to be patient. But our next period of the da'wah is we're gonna keep making public da'wah, but if anybody steps to us, if anybody harms one of ours, then, right, force will be met with force. Then we'll fight them. That's when you have Badr, that's when you have Uhud, that's when you have etc. That's when they start fighting. Anybody who gets in the way of the da'wah, then khalas. Then they'll be met with the appropriate force. Then it goes again, open da'wah to everybody. Right? But it's still limited because the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, right? They had agreements with everyone. So they're generally, it's just self-defense. We fight when it's necessary, although there are some different skirmishes, right? But that's what characterizes it, generally self-defense. But then after that, it's anything and anyone who gets in the way of calling to La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, then they may be met with a military campaign, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be in self-defense. It could be preemptive. It could be that tribe is in an agreement with that tribe who may attack us, so we have to go to them. Or it may be, like I said, that they are maligning Islam, etc., and trying to harm Muslims in some way. Khalas, right? Tayyib. So as far as today, inshallah, hopefully we'll get from line 27 to 33. So we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. قال المصنف رحمه الله نفعنا وإياه بعلمه في الدارين اللهم آمين. And again, touching on the etiquettes of studying and sacred knowledge. If y'all know, I just made a dua. I said, and what it is, or what I just said, that statement, the translation is, the author, he said. قال المصنف, قال means he said, مصنف, the author, rahimahullah, may Allah have mercy on him, right? وَنَفَعَنَا, and may Allah benefit us, بِعِلْمِهِ, by the knowledge that he's put before us, right? Because we're reading this teacher or this sheikh and this alim, we're reading his work. May Allah benefit us by that work. نَفَعَنَا وَإِيَّاهُ, and may Allah benefit him, بِعِلْمِهِ فِي الدَّارَيْنِ, both in this life and in the hereafter. Allahumma ameen. From the adab and the etiquettes, when you are studying, when you are learning, sacred knowledge is making dua for your teacher. Making dua for your teacher, and right, the author, when you're reading a book or studying, learning, etc., is making dua for them because you're benefiting from them. Just like whatever I'm teaching you all, I'm benefiting from, or I have benefited from my teachers and whatever they've taught me, studied from me, or that I study from them, excuse me, right? And what they've given and sacrifice of their time, of their knowledge, etc. So it's befitting and appropriate, and from adab, good adab, is making dua for them. So that's how it's every time. So anyways, so he said, وَأَرْبَعٌ مِّن نِّسَاءِ وَاثْنَ عَشَرٍ مِّنَ الرِّجَالِ الصُّحْبِ كُلٌّ قَدْ هَجَرٍ إِلَى بِلَادِ الْحَبْشِ في 5 عام وفيه عادوا ثم عادوا لا ملا. So now the sheikh, he's moving forward, and he's saying that, and he's talking about there was a group of both men and women who ended up leaving and migrating, right, to Al-Habash. So the first migration that took place, right, was to Al-Habash. And that's before the migration to where?
Uh, this migration is before the other famous migration. What's the famous migration? To Medina, right? Usually when people think of the hijrah, that's the first thing that comes to people's mind. But before that, right, the Muslims, they migrated not once, but twice to Abyssinia, right? And it says where they migrated to, this group of 4 women and 12 men, they went to the land of Al-Habash, and this was in the 5th year. And when we say the 5th year, we mean, continuing on the timeline, the 5th year, if we go back, it would have been during this time, in this period. All right. So look it, because we said, right, when we start saying the 5th year, the 6th year, the 7th year, right, there are 2 times that happens. The first is from the time that the Prophet ﷺ was 40 and he received revelation. Once he received revelation, they start counting. They say the 1st year of the bi'tha, the 2nd year of the bi'tha, the 3rd year of the bi'tha. So that's in this period. In the 5th year of the bi'tha, right? That's around this time when things became what? We said it's characterized by what? Extreme hardship. So it's in that period, right, that 12 men and 4 women, they went to Bilad Habash, right? And then they returned, right, within the same year, and then they ended up going back, right? So what we want to talk about is, right, what led up to them or what caused them to leave. Why did they, what caused them to leave? What are the circumstances? Who left? Why did they come back? Right? And why did they even go back again? Right? Those are the questions we want to answer. So the first thing is, like we said, in that period, things became extremely difficult. So the Prophet ﷺ, he's seeing his followers, his disciples, the people who believe in him, who trust him, right? They follow him. Right? This is obviously bothersome to him. He's seeing them being harmed. He's seeing them being cursed, being spat on, disrespected in public, etc. Right? And not only that, but like I said, especially those who are poor, they're being tortured and harmed, right, in gross ways. So the Prophet ﷺ, he recommends and he tells them, right, maybe it is better for you to go to Abyssinia, right, Al-Habash. He said, because there is a king there and a place in that place where no person is wronged, right? There's a just ruler, a just king. So you should go there, right? And so 12 men and 4 women, amongst them were Uthman ibn Affan, radiallahu anh. He's one of the men, and his wife, Ruqayya, bint Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and the wife of Uthman ibn Affan, right? They were amongst them. And if y'all want to know all their names of those who went, so it's Uthman ibn Affan, his wife Ruqayya, Uthman ibn Mad'un, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, Zubair ibn al-Awwam, Mus'ab ibn Umair, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, Abu Salama, Salama, Jahsh ibn Ri'am, Abdullah ibn Jahsh, Abu Hudhayfa ibn Utbah, Sahla bint Suhail, Amr ibn Rabi'ah, Layla bint Abi Hathma. They're the first group to leave, right? And essentially, and it's just a reality of it, they were the ones who could afford to leave, right? But they made that tremendous sacrifice to go to Abyssinia, right? And leave essentially everything they knew behind, to leave, you know, the land that they love, that they were born in, their hometown, and to have to go somewhere else, strange, not the same language, not the same culture, right? Because they had to go across the Red Sea to go into Habash, which would be modern day Ethiopia. But at that time, it would have included parts of like Eritrea, because that used to be a part of Ethiopia in the past till they seceded, right? And even, you know, other portions in that area. What's up? No, the Prophet ﷺ, he doesn't go. He doesn't leave until the Medina. But interestingly enough, a lot of people don't know, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he was amongst them. He had packed his bags and was ready, and he asked the Prophet ﷺ permission to leave and was granted permission to leave. And he was actually heading out. And when he got to the outskirts of Mecca, he was met by a non-Muslim whose name is Ibn Daghina, and in some narrations, Ibn the Ghunna, right? But he was someone who was of some stature. You know what I'm saying? He had some clout. He was one of the heads of his tribe. He said, Ila ayn ya Abu Bakr. He said, where are you going, Abu Bakr? He said, your people have cast me out, right? They've attacked me and they harm me simply because I say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, and I want to worship my Lord. Bas. Huh? And so then, of course, what do y'all think Ibn Daghina said to him? Who's a non-Muslim? What do you think he said to him? Huh? It eventually comes to that. But what does he tell them though? Is he going to snitch? No. Before that, he's standing there with Abu Bakr. They out there in the desert. Abu Bakr's got his bags packed and he's leaving. And he said, where are you going? And he told him, I'm leaving, man. I can't take you here no more. It's too much. What do you think he said to him? Why? He said, Mithluka la yakhruj wa la yukhraj. He said, nah. Somebody like you in a community should never leave, nor should they be expelled, forced to leave. He's like, no, right? And then he goes on to describe the type of man that he is. You're a family man, you're a good person, almost verbatim, all the things that Khadija radiallahu anha said about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says the same thing about him. And then he says, I will grant you protection. I'll grant you protection. When we go back, you come back with me. You can't leave. I'm not letting you leave. You're too good. You're an upstanding citizen. You're a part of the community. You're somebody who's a source of good in Mecca. I can't let you leave. And if it comes to it, I'll grant you protection. And what he does, right? He doesn't just say, I'll grant you protection. He has his sons come armed. And they come and escort Abu Bakr back into Mecca. Right? But again, this is because of the impact that Islam had on Abu Bakr and the impact by extension that Abu Bakr had in his community because of his Islam and his Iman. He wasn't somebody who like, khalas, I don't deal with those Galo people, those Adan people, those Faranji people, those Medu people. They ain't got nothing to do with them. It's not my business. If somebody, you know what I'm saying, gets killed by the police, that's none of my business because they're not Muslim. If something happens, you know what I'm saying, in this area or that community or whatever, that's none of my business. Why? Because they're not Muslim. That's not how he was. To the degree that a non-Muslim was willing to put his name on the line for him. And something to, this is all a tangent and a side note, but I wonder, and we should ask ourselves, if we were no longer next to our neighbors no more, if we was leaving, what would they say? If we were at a job and we said we're leaving, what would they say? If we was as a masjid, if we said, we're packing up and this masjid is not going to be in this neighborhood, in this community anymore, would the neighbors say, nah, man, you can't leave. We need you here. Don't answer that question. It's rhetorical. Think about it. But it's food for thought, though. It's food for thought. So anyways, so now they leave, and alhamdulillah, they find safety, they find security. Although the Quraysh, they can't abide. They see a group of people leaving and Muslims leaving, right? They got a problem with that. But they don't do anything at first. The Muslims that are there in Al-Habash, in Abyssinia, they hear a rumor. Something happened in Mecca, which is what caused them to come back. But because it said what? In the poem, he said what? ثُمَّ عَادُوا ثُمَّ عَادُوا لَا مَلَامٍ. That they came back or they returned back, right? And they can't be blamed. Why did they come back? And then not only did they go back to Mecca, they went back to Abyssinia. So it's mentioned in some ahadith that the Prophet ﷺ was, again, he's making da'wah publicly now. And it said that he recited Surah An-Najm in its entirety. And so while he's reciting, people start coming and listening at the Kaaba. And the more he's reciting throughout the surah, the more people are coming. And he reaches a point where it's mentioned in the surah to make sujood, to prostrate in the surah, towards the end of the surah. And it said that everybody who was present, they all prostrated. Because remember, for us, it might be, it might be hard to understand the process, but remember, these are Arabs who are listening to the Arabic, right, the Quran, and this is a type of speech that they've never heard before. So it's captivating them, it's caught their attention, and they, internally, inside of themselves, they recognize that there's something different about what they're hearing. This is not like regular poetry. They know poetry well. This is not the speech of some regular person. They know, they have conversation. They're the best, you know what I'm saying, when it comes to their language. They have to be, because they, for the most part, most of the people don't write, right? So the way to communicate, the way to get messages across is you have to be eloquent. You got to be able to, right, to speak good. So now when they hear the Quran like this, it hits them in a way where all of them, they feel compelled, like we have to make sujood. This is the command from Allah. Because remember also, yes, they make shirk. Yes, they associate partners with Allah, but they all believe in who? They all believe in Allah. For the most of them, they all believe in Allah, right? And so when they hear this, they all prostrate. Now, they prostrate, right? But it's just a moment in time. That's not who they are. That's just a moment. That's like an event that happens. But it turns into a rumor that everybody in Mecca became Muslim. And that gets back, it goes across the Red Sea to Abyssinia, and the Muslims who are there, they hear that. So they say, oh, everything's good. We can go back now. And so they come back. And when they come back, they don't even come all the way into Mecca. And they see that things are not the same. And things are not good. And so a few of them stay, but most of them go back. And not only do most of them go back, but now even more go back. And that's where you get, right, in the second part, Muhammad. Oh, excuse me, we ain't even get there yet. Excuse me, here, the 29th line, when they go, there were 83 men and women, with them a group, and there was 18. So now they all go back to, or they come to Mecca, and we said it was what? 12 men and 4 women. So some of them stay, right? But they go, most of them go back, and even more men and women go back, right? Okay, so yeah, so that's pretty much everything I explained right there. And so when they do, it's 83 men and 18 women. And there's difference of opinion. Was it 82 men or 83 men? But if you add it together, what's 82 plus 18? 100, yeah? So 100 or 101 people leave now. Now, I said the first time the Quraysh, they were bothered, but not bothered enough to do anything. This second time, though, remember, it's not like a city now where there could be easily in one city, there could be 500,000 people. In a city, you know what I'm saying, a modern day city, there could be, you know, especially if it's a big city, it could be like 1 million people, 2 million people, right? But at that time, that's not the case, right? There's thousands of people, but so when 100 people leave, that's a lot of people. Y'all understand? That seems like a sizable, that's like a big chunk of people. And then on top of that, because they're from different families and different groups, everybody's talking about it. And that's where like the Quraysh are like, nah, we can't abide. So when they leave, right? When they leave, the Muslims, and they go back, the Quraysh send emissaries to go after them, to try to get them back. Amr ibn al-As, who at that point hadn't become Muslim yet, he was one of them. and they go speak directly to Najashi himself, meaning they use essentially like international diplomacy, right? They use like you know what I'm saying, somebody who goes and they got connections with them, and they try to use that to get them to have them sent back. But Najashi, you know, he ends up hearing the message. I want to say it's Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. He ends up reciting portions of Surah Maryam, right, to Najashi, who is moved by what he hears. And he says that this is the same message that Musa alayhi salam brought. And so he says, no, they can stay. And they do. And they end up staying for about 14 years. They don't come back until Khaybar, right? Until the Battle of Khaybar. So, and that's after the Prophet ﷺ has made hijrah. The Muslims have left Mecca. They're in Medina for several years. They don't come back until then, right? So they end up making a life for themselves there and staying there, right? Making hijrah. So that's that. طيب. So خلاص وهن عشر وثمان ثم قد أسلم في سادس حمزة الأسد. So we already said it was 18 women, 83 or 82 men. But now the next thing is in the 6th year of what? Is it the 6th year of the Hijrah, y'all? No. The 6th year of prophethood. 6th year of revelation. All right. Hamza embraces Islam. Hamza, the lion, accepts Islam. So now, since it's the 6th year of the Bi'tha, that still means what? Still characterized by extreme hardship. It's still in that difficult period for the Muslims, right? And when I want you to understand, when we say it's a difficult period for the Muslims, meaning you're probably better off socially if your Islam is private, if you don't tell nobody. Your business will probably be okay if you don't tell nobody you're Muslim. You're probably more likely to get married if you don't tell nobody you're Muslim. You're probably more likely to be left alone in public if you don't tell nobody you're Muslim. You're probably not less likely to be harassed if you keep your Islam private or if you're just not Muslim. You're probably not going to be, right, even if you're a servant and a slave, that's already, not a good situation. But because in that circumstance, you're actually someone else's property, they might have no problem, torturing you. Like Khabbab ibn al-Arat, who was a slave during that period, right? He was asked after the Muslims, or after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, they're kind of commiserating and talking with each other, some of the companions. And they're talking about some of the worst things that had happened to them in those early days in Mecca. Because remember, Khabbab ibn al-Arat, right? He's from the vanguard of the Muslims. As-sabiqun al-awwalun min al-muhajirin, right? So when it comes to his turn to say what had happened to him, he doesn't even speak. He just takes off his shirt when he says, what's the worst thing to happen to you? And he just turns around. And he shows, and he's talking to Umar ibn Khattab, and they see black pits all over his back. Talking about black pits, about 2 inches, right, in diameter. And what happened is he was a blacksmith and a slave. And so his owner, her and her cohorts, they used to take him, tie him down, and take coal, right? Burning coal. Y'all ever used for bukhur in the house? You know how you got to get the coal burning and stuff, right? I don't know now. They got all kinds of different stuff that you can use. At least when I was growing up, my mom, she used to just use charcoal that you buy from the grocery store, the charcoal for barbecue. That hot one where you get the little burnt spots on your carpet when you drop it all over stuff. That kind of coal. They used to put it on his back. And they don't put it out. The only way it gets put out is the fat, right? When his skin is burning, right? And it keeps burning in to his skin until the fat melts. And then the fat turns into, right? When it melts, it's a liquid. And then it puts it out. Y'all understand that? So when I say in that 6th year, and it's characterized by extreme hardship, that's just one instance of what we mean by extreme hardship, right? So that's the type of stuff that they're dealing with, right? And it's during that period that Hamza, the lion, Al-Asad, he embraces Islam in the 6th year. And why is this significant? Why, aside from him being, he's the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, the paternal uncle, meaning Hamza is the brother of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's father, right? That's his khal, right? Y'all, right? Then on top of that, him and the Prophet ﷺ are close in age. They're like a year apart. So they were both suckled by the same woman, right? And so that makes them what in Islam? Because they were breastfed by the same woman in Islam, they're brothers, right? And that, like that. And because they were so close in age, but he's a little bit older and that's his uncle, they were like real close. He used to look after him, take him under his wing, right? Because his father's dead, i.e. Hamza, his brother, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's father, Abdullah, had passed, so he looks after him while he's growing up. So now, why did he become Muslim? How did he become Muslim? What are the circumstances behind that? So during this period, on a particular instance, Abu Jahl starts cursing and talking about the Prophet ﷺ, disparaging and disrespecting him, right? And there's sort of like an audience. There's a crowd, all right? And he's cursing him, and he essentially, he goes a bridge too far. He does a little bit, he's cursing the Prophet ﷺ in a way where everybody's kind of like, hey, like you crossing some lines here. And there are some women from Banu Hashim who are the tribe of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, right? He's from Banu Hashim. Now, they're not Muslim, but they still have that tribal mentality like, yo, that's one of ours. You can't be disrespecting him like that. That's, you know what I'm saying? That's from our Jama'ah. How are you going to talk about him like that? So a group of women, they go, and Hamza, right, Ibn Abdul Muttalib radiallahu anhu, he just came back from a hunting trip, right? And he's notorious and he's known as somebody who's formidable. He's strong. He's a large man, imposing man. He's known as a warrior. He's known as someone and who's also educated, right? So he's somebody who's respected, but he's also respected, especially because of him being a warrior. People don't step to him. So he hears this, and they're essentially, in today's parlance, gaslighting him. Like, you gonna let them talk about your nephew like that? That's your nephew. That's your brother's son. How you gonna let them talk about him like that? You gonna let them do that to you? Right? So of course, this gets him enraged. And he goes immediately to Abu Jahl, and he has a bow in his hand, and he hits him across the head. And when he hits him across the head, right, he says, I'm on whatever my nephew's on. Say something. Go ahead, say something, do something. I say what he says. Whatever he says, I'm on the same thing. Right? And there are other people who are from Banu Makhzum, another tribe. They want to step in and fight Hamza. And Abu Jahl, recognizing, no, he recognizes that he went too far, right? He calms him down, right? But that's initially how he comes to Islam, right? And it's mentioned in the Sirah Ibn Ishaq, that night he couldn't sleep. Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib radiallahu anhu, he couldn't sleep. He said, I was thinking about what it is that I said that my nephew says. And now I've made this public statement. How am I supposed to take that back? And not only is it a statement that I made in public, it's about something that you don't say and then you take it back. He's like, I can't do that. So he said, so I thought about it all night until I finally came to the conclusion that, you know what? I'm going to stick with this and it must be the truth. So the following day, he goes back to the Prophet ﷺ, and he speaks to him, and the Prophet ﷺ explains things to him, right? So that he knows exactly what it means. And then he accepts Islam and he says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa annaka yani Rasulullah. I testify that there's no God or deity worthy of worship except Allah, and I testify that you are the messenger of God. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? And that's how he embraces Islam. Now, the significance of that is that whatever respect, whatever the people thought about Hamza, right? And the formidability that he had, where people were afraid of him, that people were that he's this warrior, nobody wants to step to him, right? That he's this figure in the community, not that he's infamous in a negative way, but that he's somebody, right, not to be reckoned with. He's not somebody to trifle with, all right? Now, all of that is lent to Islam. All of that is lent to Islam. Because now he's one of the Muslims. And so now if somebody wants to extend their hand to a Muslim, they got to think, well, hold on. Hamza might say something. Well, hold on. Hamza might do something. All right? And so this now is a boost for Islam and the Muslims. And in that same year, it's not mentioned in the poem, but in that same year though, right, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he also becomes Muslim in the same year. And it's a response to the dua of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. He used to regularly make dua, right? Allahumma a'izz al-Islam bi ahab al-umarayn ilayk. Oh Allah, please strengthen and honor Islam by one of the two Umars who are, or either of the two Umars, who are more beloved to you. Whichever one. And the two Umars are Umar ibn Khattab and Amr ibn Hisham, who's also known as what? Abu Jahl. And obviously, who did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose? It was Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, right? And so then, of course, he has a similar reputation as Hamza in that what? Now, he's not as old as Hamza, right? But he's educated. He's not super wealthy, but they're not poor either, right? His family has, some nominal wealth, right? And he's also a formidable warrior, right? And he's an imposing figure, right? An imposing figure. And when I say imposing, what I mean by that is he's described when it's talked about how tall he was, as if, right, when he's standing amongst other people, he looks like he's on a horse. That would mean, Allahu A'lam, he's got to be at least like 6'7", right? You know what I'm saying? He's a large man. Now, are they embellishing? Is that hyperbole that they're saying, right? They're exaggerating. Either way, he's extremely tall. And it's possible. I remember one time I was at a masjid and there was a basketball player. I don't know who he is though, right? I was in the back of the masjid and somebody came in, this basketball player. And when he came in, everybody's like crowding around him. And people are trying to take his picture with him. And I'm in the back and I'm just praying like sunnah before I leave. So I don't know who it is, but I just see a bunch of people around him. Then I look and I come closer, and sure enough, there's this like towering figure over everybody else. I'm like, subhanallah. I go to shake his hand, and his hand basically eats up my hand. And I'm like, yo, I don't know, brother, can I take your picture? Can I take my picture with you? Right? And wallahi, I have the picture on my phone. I'll show you after class. I look like a toy standing next to, right, to his brother. He's like double my size, like in height. It looks like AI. In today's time, you'd have been like, yo, that's AI. That's not a real person. Wallahi. He's so huge. I'm saying that to say though, when you say like somebody who's sitting like they're so tall that they look like they're standing, like that's possible. That's the point I want to make. All right. Now, anyways, so now Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu an, he becomes Islam, and so does Hamza. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu an, who was also from those who early embraced Islam, but he was also from those who were not wealthy, right? He mentions that before Umar ibn Khattab, we were not capable of praying publicly at the Kaaba. It wasn't possible. But after Umar ibn Khattab, he was like, it was completely different picture. We could now pray in public, and there was less harm and less attacks, right? Because, of course, anytime somebody wants to harm or attack a Muslim, they got to think twice now. Is Umar ibn Khattab around? Is Umar ibn Khattab with them? Because if so, something might happen. There's going to be some furniture moving around. Ain't no, we beat you up and leave you and ain't no repercussions. No, it's not like that anymore, right? So it brought honor to Islam and the Muslims, right? طيب, with Umar ibn Khattab embracing Islam. طيب, so how many things did we say happened now? So we got the migration to Al-Habash. How many times? 2 times. The first time, how many people migrated? 16. 4 women, 12 men. Among the notable, right? All of them are notable companions, but especially Uthman ibn Affan, right? Who later on becomes the third Khalifa in Islam, and also the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ruqayya, right? Radiyallahu anhum ajma'in. And then there's a second migration to Al-Habash. How many people? Give or take, 100, 101, 82 or 83 men, and 18 women from the Sahabiyat, right? And then Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, right? Al-Asadullah, right? The lion of Allah embraces Islam, right? طيب. طيب. وبعد 9 من سن رسالة مات أبو طالب ذو كفالة وبعده خديجة توفيت من بعد أيام 3 مضت. So after 9 years into being sent as a messenger, the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passes away, Abu Talib, right? The one who used to take care of him. And then after his passing, shortly after that, right? It says the wife of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and it's no stretch to say the love of his life, she also passed away only after 3 days of the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passing away. So why is this significant, right? Or what are some of the reasons behind the significance, other than the obvious, that it being his uncle and it being his wife? The uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Talib, he was the public support, or rather protection, of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, right? The exterior support. So when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes out in public, when he's dealing with people, when he's dealing with delegations, when he's just going about his day outside, the person who is protecting him is his uncle, because of his reputation, because he is the son of, and his uncle Abu Talib is the son of Abdul Muttalib, right? Who is the head of, or was the head of, the Quraysh, right? He's one of the most important figures, right? So because they have that reputation, this afforded the Prophet ﷺ, to a great degree, a level of some protection when it came to the brunt of the problems and the issues that were facing the Muslims. So he's not being tortured like Khabbab ibn al-Arat, because he's a slave. Khabbab ibn al-Arat is a slave. So he has no protection. And there are others who are parts of tribe, like Umar ibn Khattab, who have a certain stature where people are afraid to step to him. So even though he's Muslim, so not everybody amongst the Muslims are getting the same treatment, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he's also, right, he's being tortured. He's being harmed, but not to that degree. And a good part of that is because of his uncle Abu Talib. He's respected. He's an elder, right? And because of him, out of respect for you, we're not going to step to your nephew like that. But you, right? That's how basically what it is. And so now when he passes, though, that protection is gone. And the things that they had wanted to do to the Prophet ﷺ that they could never even imagine doing while his uncle is there, now they can do it. Now it's open season on the Prophet ﷺ. And then, of course, what he represents as the father figure of the Prophet ﷺ, right? That was his mentor. That was his father figure. That was his, right? The person who looked after him since the time that he was young. All of that is gone, right? Then, shortly after that, we said he's the external support. Then you have the internal support from his wife, the love of his life, Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. When he first receives revelation, who's the first person that he confides in? She's the first person he goes to, right? His wife. And not only that, he's vulnerable with her, and he shares and he tells her everything. Listen, I was up, right? You know, I go to the cave of Hira. I've been going there and something has happened. He explained everything that happened to her, right? And then not only does she console him, not only does she comfort him, right? Not only does she comfort and console him, but she even tells him, like, listen, right? There's no way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to abandon you or humiliate you. Ain't no way. Because of the man who I know you to be, right? This can be nothing but good. And then not only does she comfort and console him, she advises him, because she's the one who tells him to go to her relative, Waraqa ibn Nawfal. She advises him on what should we do next, right? So imagine, right? That's just a snapshot of everything that she was to the Prophet ﷺ. She's a wealthy woman. Her wealth is there to help him and support him, right? All the children that he had are from her, right? We talked about the virtues, right, of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, right? From them is that all of the children that he had except for one. Who was it? Except for Ibrahim. But all of the other children were from her, right? While he was married to her, he married no other woman. They were married for 25 years together. 25 years, right? He married no other woman. After her death, Khadija Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, who the Prophet ﷺ said with his own mouth when he was asked, who do you love more than anybody else? He said, Aisha, without hesitation. He said, I love Aisha. Look it, he said with his mouth, I love her more than anybody else. But from the way the Prophet ﷺ talked about Khadija, from the way the Prophet ﷺ used to reminisce about Khadija, Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, I was jealous of Khadija more than anybody else, and I never even met the woman. I never even met her before, and I'm jealous of her. Look, that's how she talked, showing the place that she had in the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, he used to, whenever he would slaughter animals for meat, right? Sheep, goat, whatever, when they're butchering it up and they're processing it, right? Said he would always give a portion and a share to Khadija's friends. That's after she died, years later, right? That's how much she was in his heart, in his mind. So now, this woman who, essentially, like I said, the love of his life, she passes away. So the internal comfort and support that the Prophet ﷺ was receiving with her presence and her standing by his side, right, is no longer there. So he now no longer has the external support, and he now no longer has what? We said the what? The internal support. So, but what that does do, though, is that now this opens up the Prophet ﷺ to completely and utterly rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because now he has nobody else. Now he has to completely and utterly rely. Now, obviously, he already trusts in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, he already relies on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. nobody does so better than and more so than the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. But this is only accentuated and exaggerated even further with the real practical people that are in his life no longer being there, right? And not only that, but what's also very difficult and challenging is the fact that a part and parcel, or not even a part and parcel, but they both died as a direct result of the 3-year boycott that the Quraysh placed on them, right? So they are directly responsible for the death of the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ and his wife. Because during that period when they had the boycott, right? No food, right? This is the boycott. The terms were, we're not going to give them any food. We're not going to do any business with them. Nobody can marry from them. Nobody in Mecca can deal with Banu Hashim. Nobody can deal with them. And they're essentially on the outskirts of Mecca, which of course which led to starvation, people right scrounging around for scraps. And the only way even food could even get in there, they had to sneak in food. There are other people who are sympathetic to their plight who try to sneak in food for them. Not much unlike even what's happening today. You still see in Gaza, no food, no business, no dealings, completely cut them off. Even then, they used to do that. And the tactics of those who are enemies to Islam don't change. Allah musta'an. Yes. No, the boycott happened. He didn't mention it in the poem, but during that boycott, towards the end, Abu Talib, he dies. Then Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha dies, right? And then shortly after and then they come out of that's just when they came out of the boycott, right? And it's mentioned that she died as a result of the boycott, right? And the extreme hardships that they had to go through during that period, right? So that year became known as, when all of that happened, Am al-Huzn, the year of sorrow or grief and sadness. Now, yeah. Say that again. Yeah, I told you, because of the hardships that she had to endure, the lack of food, lack of, necessities or whatever, she became sick, right? And then she passed away, right? Not because somebody came in and killed her. No. So yeah. And so actually, is the adhan of Maghrib? No? Khalas. So actually, we'll stop here, because as you can see, there is a lot to talk about. The Sheikh, he only mentions, right, that after 50 and a quarter, meaning the Prophet ﷺ is 50 years old, and a quarter would be 4 months, right? 4 months or 3 months, depending on how you break it up, right? Because 12 months, quarter, right? 3 months. But either way, says a group of jinn from Nasibin accepted Islam and returned to advise, right? وَبَعْدَ خَمْسِينَ وَرُبًا أَسْلَمَ جِنُّ النَّصِيبِينَ وَعَادُوا فَعْلَمَا. And Nasibin, that's an area between Turkey and Syria. And there are some jinn that came, but that's after what happens in Ta'if. That's after what happens in Ta'if, right? And that's a pretty long story about what happened, and some details that I want to go into, because they're very important, and I think it's important for us to know. So we'll stop here. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. If you could stop that, brother. And then if there's any questions, right, or comments about what we talked about, or anything else for that matter.